Hello everyone, this is Rebecca with Retro Crime. So I am doing my first installment of Mobster Mondays. So the first person we're going to talk about is going to be George Remus. He's known as the king of bootleggers. And he's well known from the Cincinnati, Ohio area, which is where I'm from. So those of you may not know who he is, because he is somebody who came up in the Boardwalk Empire series that came up that was out on HBO. And I was like, I've never heard of him. And then I looked him up. I was like, my goodness, he's from Cincinnati, Ohio. Or, well, he did most of his bootlegging in Cincinnati. He was actually born, let's see, pull him up really quick. So he was born in Germany, Landsberg, Germany. And in November 13th, 1876, to Frank and Marie Remus. They arrived in Chicago, Illinois, June 15th, 1882. So he briefly lived in Maryland. They lived in Wisconsin, finally moving to Chicago in 1885. And he was 14 years old. George supported his family by working at his uncle's pharmacy. So, which is interesting because he did that, and that's going to play a role into his bootlegging. So eventually he worked his way up, graduating from the Chicago College of Pharmacy at the age of 19, and he became a certified pharmacist. And then he bought his first pharmacy at the age of 21, and he was married to Lillian Clough in 1899 after a quick courtship. And within 5 years, he expanded by buying another drugstore, and he soon got tired of working the long hours, so he decided to, go into business, but he also decided to become a lawyer. And he was well known for being a criminal defense lawyer. So he attended the Illinois College of Law, later merging with DePaul University, and he was admitted to the Illinois bar in 1904. Now, Remus specialized in criminal defense, especially murder, and became quite famous due to a large part of the highly publicized William Cheney Ellis murder case in 1914. And it was in this case that Remus pioneered the transitory insanity defense, which is basically not guilty by reason of insanity. So at that point, by 1920, he was earning $500,000 a year, approximately over $7 million by today's money. So what really got him was the ratification of the 18th Amendment, which with the passage of the Volstead Act, which is what started Prohibition. And that was, when did they pass that? January 17th, 1920. So Prohibition, pull this down a little bit, began in the U.S. within a few months, and he saw how his criminal clients were becoming very wealthy. He decided to kind of take advantage of a loophole in the Volstead Act. So the only way you could mass produce alcohol was if it was medical grade alcohol. And because he had his license as a pharmacist, he decided to take advantage of this deal and become a bootlegger by using his pharmacy connections. So, once he started doing the illegal production and distribution of alcoholic beverages, he became the king of the bootleggers. Um, he memorized the act, so he knew all the loopholes because he was a great criminal defense attorney. And he was putting about, oh God, let's see, what was the number here? He moved to Cincinnati, where 80% of America's bonded whiskey was located. And this is why he's famous for Cincinnati. And in less than 3 years, with the help of a trusted number two man, George Connors, Remus made about $40 million and had about 3,000 people working for him. $40 million. Now, it is said that he was the inspiration for The Great Gatsby. That F. Scott Fitzgerald used him as the inspiration for that. But it's also told that maybe Arnold Rothstein was too, who was another famous bootlegger at that time. But let's see. America's most famous distillers, including the Fleischmann Distillery, many small towns such as Newport, Kentucky, which is where I spent most of my formative youth, became a drinking towns where gamblers opened small casinos to entertain their drunken patrons. So let me just say this. Newport, Kentucky. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, but I was raised in Newport, Kentucky up until I was about 16, and then my parents divorced and I moved to Fort Thomas, Kentucky. But most of Newport was filled with casinos and gambling halls and strip clubs and all these places. It was crazy. My mother grew up in Newport. And when she was about 13 years old, so we're talking 1956, she was actually a hat check girl at a lot of those casinos and worked in those places when she was very, very young. But that's how they helped, support their families. So, he also had some distilleries in Cincinnati. And let's see here. They had, oh God, I mean, just the things he was doing. And I implore you to do your own research on George Remus. But, again, because he was known as the king of the bootleggers, he got away with a lot of things. I mean, he worked with Capone. He worked with Colosimo. He worked, he did business with these people. So he was well known. Now, in his family life, when he married Lillian Clough, they had a daughter born in 1900. Her name was Romola Remus. Now, people don't know who she is, but she was a child actress in the silent films. And she played the cinema's first Dorothy Gale in the 1908 short film of The Wizard of Oz when she was 8 years old. So there's that. Now, Romola, let's see here. I looked her up too. Romola Remus Dunlap. Now, she died in 1987 at the age of 86. Never had any children, but did get married. And she did some acting, but, she really did what she could to distance herself from her father's name. Now, back to George. So, they had her, and their marriage ended in a divorce in 1920. Now, after that, he began having it ended because he had an affair with his legal secretary, Augusta Imogen Holmes. Now, she was a young divorcee with a daughter. But once he and Lillian divorced, he married Imogen. And they got married in Newport, Kentucky in June 1920. Now, outside of his bootlegging things, in 1925, Remus's plan to use his legal knowledge to evade the law went awry. And he was indicted on thousands of violations of the Volstead Act. Convicted by a jury that made its decision in under 2 hours. So, swift justice there. He spent 2 years in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary for bootlegging. While in prison, he befriended another inmate and eventually confided in him that his wife, Imogen, had control over his money. Now, that inmate was an undercover prohibition agent, Frank Dodge, who was there to gather information of that sort. So instead of reporting the info, Dodge resigned his job and began an affair with Remus's wife. You can't make that up. So they basically took all his money and, they ran off with some things. So in late 1927, Imogen Holmes filed for divorce from Remus. On the way to court, though, this is where things get interesting. To finalize the divorce, Remus had his driver chase the cab carrying her and her daughter through Eden Park. Now, Eden Park is pretty big, and it's also got an amazing art museum in the center of it. But he literally chased her through Eden Park in Cincinnati, finally forcing her off the road. Remus jumped out and shot her in the stomach in front of pretty much everybody. So, yeah, he literally chased her through Eden Park with a gun, shot her in the gut, and she died. Now, the prosecutor in the case, this is going to be fun, was 30-year-old Charles Phelps Taft II, son of Chief Justice of the United States and former President William Howard Taft, who also was from Cincinnati, and brother of the future Senator Robert A. Taft. So what's interesting is when Remus did this, because he had pioneered as a lawyer the insanity defense, guess what he used to get, to mitigate his murder charge with his ex-wife? The insanity defense. So, pleaded transitory insanity, which he had used previously during his time as a defense lawyer, emphasizing the distress of his wife's betrayal. Now, which I understand this, because he's saying that I went nuts because I found out that the guy in jail with me was an undercover agent, and instead of telling the FBI what I was doing, he quit and went and found my wife and then had an affair and stole my money. I mean, I know some guys who would go crazy for less than that. So I get that. So the state of Ohio committed Remus to an insane asylum since the jury found him insane, but prosecutors were thwarted by their previous claim, backed up by the prosecutor's 3 well-known psychiatrists, that he could be tried for murder because he was not insane. And Remus was freed from the asylum after only 7 months. So after his release from the institution in Lima, so they sent him to an institution in Lima, Ohio, he was an informal tutor to another well-known Cincinnati lawyer, William Foster Hopkins, for a period of about 6 years. George Remus later moved to Covington, Kentucky, across from the Ohio River, which great partying there, and lived there for about 20 years without incident. Married for a third and final time to his secretary. He's got a thing for secretaries, Blanche Watson. And then he ran a small contracting firm, Washington Contracting, until he suffered a stroke in August 1950. And then he lived at a boarding house in Covington in the care of a nurse, and he died in 1952 at the age of 75. And he's buried beside his third wife in Riverside Cemetery in Falmouth, Kentucky, which I know Falmouth too because my grandmother was staying in a rest home in Falmouth. Well, I used to go down there when I was a kid and go see her. So, and then, you've got the guy who played Remus in the Boardwalk Empire series, which they did a pretty good job trying to find somebody to embody George Remus. But let's run back on his details. So he was a German, born in Germany, moved to the States, became a trained pharmacist at the age of 14, and then got tired of that at 19, went to college, became a lawyer, and basically created the insanity defense, which is kind of cool. So so many people have gotten off on the mental defect aspect, so he pioneered that and then ended up using it himself when he killed his second wife in the park, Eden Park. Beautiful place. And when you look back on the Great Gatsby series with Leonardo DiCaprio, yeah, he doesn't look like Leonardo DiCaprio, but, it's kind of cool that, his opulence, because he had a mansion. He had these wild parties. He was known for these parties in Cincinnati. Him and Imogen did these crazy parties. He had booze everywhere. I mean, he also worked with Nucky, let's see, I'm trying to remember his actual, Nucky Johnson, who the character Nucky Thompson in Boardwalk Empire is based off of. So, he was working with some of the greatest of the greats of the bootleggers, but he was the guy that they got most of their stuff from. And so he worked with Arnold Rothstein, Lucky Luciano, Al Capone. These are people that he knew it very intimately. And, had his hands in with the entertainment industry with his daughter, Romula, being the first Dorothy Gale. So that is the story of George Remus. So, a lot of people don't know of him. Many people have not heard of him unless you watch Boardwalk Empire. But here he is, the guy who basically started it all and found the loophole to do what he wanted to do with, with booze, using pharmacy, making medical grade alcohol. So, but that is George Remus. So, if you have any questions, comments, let me know on the YouTube channel. So I'm going to upload this there with the photographs and everything else of all the players involved. But George Remus, King of the Bootleggers, that is our guy. So this is Rebecca with Red True Crime. Mobster Mondays. So on Mondays, I'm going to talk about a different mobster, different bootlegger, whatever. So we're going to start off with George Remus. Hope you found this informative. And thank you for watching and viewing and commenting. Subscribe, share, and all that good stuff. And have a great night. Thanks.